Welcome to Crash Course in Commercial Real Estate. We converted our in-house training program to a podcast to teach you prospecting, negotiation, business planning, and other fundamental skills to become a successful commercial real estate agent. And now, here's your host, Brady Collier.
Well, we want to welcome you back to the commercial real estate training. I'm here with Kyle and Shannon, and we are going to talk a little bit about the specialties within commercial real estate. So in previous videos, I named them. I'll do so again in case this is the first one you've watched. Commercial real estate is a really big industry, anything with income producing property. So if somebody buys a hotel, they're in the commercial real estate. If they buy a golf course, they're in commercial real estate. Kind of the main segments of commercial real estate that we as commercial real estate brokers think about. We think about office, we think about industrial, we think about retail, and we think about multifamily, specifically apartment complexes. Those are kind of the big four. And then you have some niches like hospitality is its own thing. And then there's people who specialize in land brokerage and golf course brokerage and so on and so forth. But really the big four are retail, office, industrial, and multifamily. So I've got Kyle. And Kyle, tell us a little bit about your specialty and about your business, what you do for a living. Let's start there.
Yeah, so in commercial real estate, and we've talked about this on other episodes, but you sometimes start doing a lot of different things, and you'd call those a generalist. And so I may have had touch points on a lot of those that you mentioned, but 95% of my business is in retail. And so retail encompasses retail and restaurant, and really anywhere the consumer goes. And so of all of them, it's what most people are generally the most familiar with, because it's where they go to get their groceries, it's where they go out to eat, it's where they go work out, it's where they go shop.
It's also what they're most excited about, because they always want to know what new
restaurants coming to Lubbock, Texas. And so, it's probably the most at face value exciting to the general population, because it's something they understand and know a little bit about. But there's so much that we don't recognize as just general consumers. We go to a shopping center and we go to a grocery store, and the last thing, if you're not in the business, you're thinking about is, how did this get here, and who bought the land, and who brought the investors, and who put all these pieces together to where I can go shop at this great grocery store, eat at this great restaurant. Well, but that's what we're supposed to be experts in.
The consumer also never thinks about, when their favorite restaurant closed, why did it close? Was it staffing? Was it food safety? Or was it that they committed to a lease where they were paying way too much in rent and they couldn't sell enough food to justify their rent in that space? So they had to go down to a smaller space. Maybe they leased too big of a space. Right. So that's the playground he's in all day, every day, is retail and restaurant. Let's start with a couple of
Or people think, who in the world selected that location for a restaurant? I think most people have had that thought before, and they're probably right. Yeah. Who made that decision?
So let's start with contrasting when I got into the business, early 2000s, I worked for another firm in town, and they said, when you get into the business, you're going to choose your lane, and you're going to run in your lane. So within the office, you don't have a lot of competition happening. And so I chose multifamily because I came, as I told you the other day, I started selling houses, wasn't a great fit for me personality-wise. So I started selling income-producing property, duplexes, quadruplexes, and then I jumped straight into multifamily, and I sold apartment complexes. And so, Kyle, I'll tell you what my perception of the difference is, having done retail now for the last 7 years, having spent more than 7 years doing apartment complexes. But what would be your perception of the differences between those two specialties?
Those two specifically. So I think the biggest for somebody entering into the business that they need to recognize, if you're brokering apartment complexes, you're going to do 2 to 5 deals a year. I'm sure there's people that do a lot more than 5 a year, but generally you're going to do much, much fewer transactions.
That's exactly right. My average was 4 to 5 deals a year. But my average deal, and we're in West Texas, so if you're in Los Angeles and you're watching this, you can't even imagine a 200-unit apartment complex trading between $5 and $10 million. But that was my reality in the early.
That would be your single-family home.
Yeah, that would be a home in Los Angeles. But in Lubbock, Texas, with 300,000 people, the average person in retail and restaurant may do 30 deals a year, but the average multifamily broker may do 5. I was a 22-year-old guy who jumped into commercial real estate fresh out of college, no experience, super young. And the person buying and selling apartment complexes, if they own multiple $10 million assets, they've achieved a certain status. And so it took a lot of work to know enough to have enough knowledge base, expertise to gain their trust. So it was a hard space to get going in because I didn't start on a team where there's a lot of brokers selling apartment complexes. And so we'll get into individuals versus teams within the industry later. And so I would say that you've identified for sure in multifamily, the transactions are larger, but there's fewer of them that occur because there's only a couple hundred apartment complexes here. Whereas you look at the number of retail spaces within all the shopping centers and all the retail in the whole market is a multiple of that number.
That's right.
So number of transactions and size of transactions would be a big difference there. What do you think about the type of person? Let's go to another specialty and contrast it with yours. Have you noticed any difference between the retail brokers in your network, whether sales agents or leasing agents, and say office and industrial or land or anything else?
Well, you can think about the type of people that generally, and not to stereotype, but generally be doing industrial type transactions. But there's a little bit less formality probably to industrial transactions than there might be to office for sure. Because on office space, you're going to be dealing with more corporate businesses. Industrial, you might be dealing with folks that drive forklifts and whatnot, and then in land and farm and ranch especially, you might be dealing with people in jeans and cowboy boots. And so every different vertical has a certain stereotype that comes with it, or the type of person.
The number one broker in our system, the NAI network, he's actually in, what city is he in? Up there in the Northeast.
Philadelphia.
He's in the Philly area. Yeah. He does industrial, but he's like us. But he deals with big companies doing industrial warehousing and distribution facilities and so on. If you're in West Texas and you're doing industrial, you may be dealing with the guy driving the forklift. And we'll get into later, that's the user who buys it to operate his business. He owns a battery warehouse and he wants to go and put the pallets up. And so those are stereotypes, but there's some truth to them, especially what he said to the farm and ranch. If you're selling farm and ranch, you're going out to your showings on your Ranger, in your jeans and cowboy boots. And all of us in the industry that didn't start in retail, we all think of the retail brokers as very pretentious, kind of snooty guys that wear Rolexes and dress super fancy and all of that. So that's how as a multifamily broker, I thought they were the divas of the industry.
Maybe I'll earn a Rolex one day, but yeah, in retail, it's so diverse, the type of business owners you deal with.
Tell me what's most fun about dealing with retail owners that a multifamily guy would not have the experience of dealing.
Yeah, so and we alluded to this, I think, in what we like about commercial real estate in one of our intro podcasts, but the amount of exposure I get to people's businesses and the amount of understanding and the amount of different industries I get to gain understanding in. I mean, as far as the numbers of restaurants and how their occupancy cost is such a key component to how they succeed as a restaurant, or fitness centers and the type of traffic and members and the demographics that they succeed in and the number of people they need in a 1, 3, and 5 mile radius, or retail and what co-tenants they need to have there and who they want to be next to and how they succeed. And so you learn so much about so many types of businesses, and I just love that. It's really...
It's engaging, and you're helping people achieve their goals, which you've shared as one of your objectives of getting into the industry, is helping people achieve their goals.
Right. And my perception of apartments, for example, as a comparison, is apartments is very, very numbers based. It's very formulaic.
It's absolutely. You're never having an owner who's going to go occupy space and run his own restaurant business or his own nail salon and see him succeed and open 5 more. It's a guy who comes with millions of dollars to the table. You're going to help him make millions more. It's all about return on investment, his cap rate. It's just a numbers game. Whereas retail is one aspect of it is helping entrepreneurs succeed in their businesses, and that's a lot of fun. Right. And as far as industrial, we're about out of time on this one, so I'll ask some of the industrial and office friends of ours in the industry what they perceive about theirs but that's a little bit of peek behind the door in Kyle's business and what retail is like. Do you have any questions on that, retail versus some of the other verticals?
I don't have any questions on that one. That's pretty straightforward.
You answered all of her questions right up front. That sounds great. All right, I've got Joe Magby here with NAI in Lubbock, and Joe's one of our agents. And Joe, of all of the business that you've done, you've somewhat taken on a generalist, but if you had to break down kind of the work that you do, what of this is part of what is commercial real estate? And we're talking about all the the specialties. We've already talked about retail and restaurant. We're going to talk about multifamily and land specialty, like golf course and land and other things. But what would you say most of your business has been in?
I'd say about half to 60% would be on the industrial side, in the industrial space, or in that somewhat of a specialty sort of industrial kind of thing where it's doesn't really necessarily fit into some of the other major categories, but some of the oddball stuff. So,
I want to drill into the industrial because I think that's interesting for those of you that are out there. Shannon, if you didn't know this, Joe started his commercial real estate career working with me and Grant doing retail and restaurant. And then he transitioned from that, and since then he's done a lot of industrial. So of all of the deals he's done, a large percentage since he transitioned out of retail and restaurant has been industrial. So for Shannon's sake, as she's trying to frame in what is commercial real estate and trying to get all of the specialties in her mind, can you talk to the differences between doing industrial transactions and if you want to use retail and restaurant to contrast it with, or just other real estate in general, however you want to frame that?
I think, buying and selling is generally, the same. I mean, buying a piece of land or selling a piece of land, anywhere is the same. But, as far as the general aspect of it, but I would say that in the industrial space, the questions are different. So if you're looking at, retail client is really more focused on the end user. The end user if you think about Home Depot, they sell screwdrivers. Well, they want to be in the place where people are coming that use screwdrivers every day. So people with houses or people who are building houses or some of those things, the end user, versus in the industrial level, it's more it's less the end user and more the middle of that stream. So manufacturing or distribution of those things, and so the questions become different. It's not really so much about traffic counts and about visibility in the frontage. It's not so much about that easy access for a drive-through or being on the hard corner. It's different. It's questions like can an 18-wheeler get in here? Can we unload the 18-wheeler easily? What is the condition of the yard space?
Where's the closest rail spur?
Yes.
Ports, interstate traffic.
Absolutely. How tall is, if I'm looking for a warehouse, a lot of the question I get asked is how tall is it? How tall are the eave heights? Because we have to put in big agriculture tanks in there, and they're 20 feet high, and so we need at least 25 feet of clearance in the middle. Or how many roll-up doors are there? And so
dock height. Yeah,
dock height versus grade height loading and unloading. And so the questions become just different as far as that goes.
Have you noticed, that's great, thank you. Have you noticed a difference in the type of client? And I don't know if you have or not, but some people, for example, I was with Kyle the other day, and he said the real different client is the farm and ranch broker, because he's always dealing with ranchers, and they're just good old boys, they're country, and they're good to work with, as opposed to these pretentious retail people. You know how those retail people are.
Yeah, just.
So have you noticed any, can you characterize industrial clients and contrast it with any other type of clients?
I think, you have a big spread there. So I think if you're dealing with a large retail user, would kind of be similar to dealing with a very large industrial user. So did a deal recently with Halliburton. And that's kind of like doing a deal with an HEB. They are the 900-pound gorilla in the room. They know it. And so you go at them the same way with, hey, here's what my client needs, let's work out a deal. Versus, I think the prospecting is a little different, because as you call through some of the smaller, we do a lot of work in the Permian Basin. So calling through some of those guys and saying, ABC Drilling and Sons or whatever, you make a cold call and you say, hey, I'm looking for the guy to talk to about real estate. And they go, yeah, I think that's Doug. Let me get him. He's back in the shop doing something. It's just, so the interfacing with those clients, at least on the ground floor, is a lot different than trying to get around umpteen different gatekeepers just to talk to whoever you need to talk to.
How about the difference between just let's take retail and industrial in that vein, as far as the effectiveness of your call campaigns on retail versus industrial? Is face-to-face more important or more practical in the industrial than in retail, or is it basically the same? And I'm not fishing for a certain answer here. I just wanted to know your experience.
I found face-to-face to be more effective, specifically if you're in the lower or the smaller to mid-range industrial clients. You get in there, you talk to somebody. A lot of times they're very similar to your farm and ranch guys. The good old boys, they like to work with their hands. They don't want to spend a whole ton of time on the phone. They'd rather see your face, shake your hand, and go from there. So I found that to be more effective. It's just about catching them when you can, because they're busy people. So.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Any thoughts on industrial real estate? It is a totally different can of worms than the retail and office and other things that you've interfaced with over the last 3 weeks.
I don't have any questions.
All right.
Right on.
Thank you, Joe. Appreciate it.